everyone. We're so excited to have so many of you here today for our very fun fireside chat on 2023 HR trends and how to prepare for them. And mostly I'm excited because we have a great guest today, Daneal Charney with us. And I can tell you guys are excited because we had over 300 people register for this event. So really, really great. Before we sort of dive right in, Daneal is a co-author of the 2021-2022 People Benchmarking Report for high growth SaaS companies, a frequent contributor to the Globe and Mail, Toronto Star, HR Reporter. She's a top 25 human resources winner. And most importantly, she's someone I consider a friend and have known from a long time and is one of the smartest people in this. So I think we're in for a really great chat today. And I will be monitoring the chat. So please feel free to ask questions and I will make sure to embed them into what we're saying. So welcome, Daneal. We're happy to have you here today.
Hey, Leah, so excited. Hope we're going to have some fun.
Yeah, I think we will. Yeah, let's dive right in.
All right.
Well, actually, yeah, okay, let's dive in. Yeah. So we're already starting to hear of posted jobs being changed from remote to hybrid. Do you think 2023 is going to see a move back to the office?
Yeah, I mean, as you said, we're already seeing this, and I think pretty unsuccessfully, because there is a huge gap between, as we know, what we want as employees and what employers want. And I see employers just really trying to push collaboration and connection through the office, which is an old construct. So, I mean, in terms of some of the things I tell companies is if you don't have a meaningful reason that the person needs to be in the office, you're not going to be able to get them to stay in the office. As well as just a critical mass, right? Like if you have some crossover days and you have enough of a volume. I know I went into Mars this week and there was enough people and enough social interaction that I was like, you know what, maybe I should come into the office, kind of testing my paradigm that I went in with. So, but what's really important here, office, no office, it's the strategy. What drives me crazy is only 30% of companies actually have a strategy around this. So the companies that are working effectively and seeing the productivity is they have a communication stack. They understand how to use different tools, when to use them. They've codified how they operate. They have more of a written culture than an oral culture, because you're not going to be able to communicate in real time. So you're going to have to say, this was the decision made and why, and here's the documentation to support that so people can look at that when they have time. So you're just going to have to use tools differently. And yeah, that's what scares me, is that companies actually haven't put into the operational structure and principles that this really requires.
I totally agree. I have a bunch of friends who are, they have to go into the office twice a week, but they go in and they're the only ones there.
Mm-hmm.
And I just came to the office to work on Zoom. So you at least need a strategy about this team comes in together on this day. Like if you're going to come in, you should have a reason for coming in terms of productivity. But,
Right.
Another thing you said.
Just what you said, employees are customers, right? They're giving you their time, their motivation, their energy, and then you took them in there and they're doing the same thing. Like, how does that make sense?
Yeah, but what is interesting is I have a friend who was like, I'm never going back to the office, and worked for a company without an office, but they had a WeWork space. And people started going in and realizing, oh, I like being around my coworkers. I like my commute now because it's the only time in my day I have to myself to listen to music or to listen to a podcast. And so that company actually got an office and people are coming in. So I see the trend going on both sides. Some people are starting to feel like they do want to be in a so hopefully the right people find it. Everyone can have what they want.
Right.
For companies that are staying remote first, what are the challenges you think they're going to face to this approach, and what advice do you have for the people in those companies?
Yeah, I think you're going to be surprised by the challenge that I bring up. But I think also it will resonate. I mean, my general advice is this is a different operating model. We've gone through this huge disruption of work, and it's given us this gift to work anywhere, anytime. But most of our companies are not sitting down and saying, what does that actually mean? So to me, you start with first principles. You don't build on top of, you say, okay, the world looks different. What does this afford us? What are some of the limitations here? You don't just convert, say, okay, well, we had this meeting, now it's a Zoom meeting. That's not how it works. So you try to figure out what you're actually trying to achieve, how you're going to best get there. And there's lots of great playbooks that you can riff off and like look at as inspiration. So you're not just starting from, ground zero. The biggest challenge that I see, and this is probably not just next year, it's probably like 4 or 5 years. I think this is the innovation we need to go through, is we're still judging performance by inputs, where I say inputs, time worked, behaviors and activities versus outcomes and outputs. I can't remember the 2 ladies who wrote this book probably 10 years ago called The Results Only Work Environment. That was groundbreaking. We still haven't gotten there. So that's why I think we need to get, and I'll give you some examples. We're still valuing people because of the time they commit. What I mean by that is the people who are workhorses and do the extra hours, people who don't take vacation because they're too important, the people who take, work on the weekends are still valued more because of time versus output. Tenure is still valued too much. Job design, full-time people versus people who are consultants and freelancers and contractors who may add even more value, right? Are given less benefits, are treated differently. The location, are you located next to the headquarters, whatever that means anymore? Visible participation. Are you very extroverted and you're in social activities and you talk up in meetings? Again, that's not productivity. That's not, that's what we're used to. What we observe and see in the office is what we're still thinking about as performance. So that's the shift I think we need to make. Big mouthful there, but.
No, that's such a good point. And all I keep thinking in my head is about the note Elon Musk sent out yesterday. If you happen to see it.
No, what did it say?
I mean, I'll summarize it, but essentially he said, like, commit to working crazy hours and doing things way above and beyond, or you're going to be fired.
Okay.
He had a date in there. So
okay.
Yeah.
You might as well just punch in, punch out.
Yeah, it's funny when in the last startup I was at, I was interviewing someone and he asked me, is FaceTime important here? And I was like, no, we don't use that app. And he's like, no, FaceTime, like being in the office. And I was like, I've never heard of this concept. He was coming from a big company. And I was like, this is not the right person to work here. Yeah, we need to move away from it, which kind of actually leads into my before I lead into my next question, we have a question for you, and I don't want to, it's probably not going to be easy to relate back. What was the book recommendation for the book you were just?
Very old book, Results Only Work Environment, ROWE. Yeah.
Got it. Okay, perfect. So, so my next question, leads into sort of the era we're moving into. So, Brene Brown, I don't know how many of you have seen this, but I really loved it. She talked about how we were moving from, in the early 1920s, the era where physical strength was what we needed to do our job. And then we moved into the era where brain power was really important. And now we're moving into the era of heart, and, empathy is really valued. So, on LinkedIn, I see a ton of bad leadership being called out. What do you think leading with empathy and heart is going to mean for 2023? And how can HR leaders work with the leadership team to make sure they support this in a genuine way? Because I think we all know it's unfortunate, but if it doesn't come from top down, it's really going to be hard to implement throughout the organization. And I think for some leaders, it'll be a hard shift. For others, it's what they've been waiting for a long time. So yeah, what advice would you give to our leadership teams on moving to the
Yeah,
next?
well, it's interesting. I mean, I am trained as a coach, and one of the amazing things that it has shifted my style from more of a thinking I need to be a SME and an advisor to being a true coach. And when you learn to coach and you coach the other leaders, and everyone at the leadership level learns that, coaching is about holding people accountable, but it's about empathy. It's about knowing the other person, trusting the other person knows the answer, and you're there to guide them, and you're there to ask them powerful questions, and you're there to give them feedback. So it's funny because in one organization, I basically went from the top down, training everyone on being a coach. And I feel like we were learning to be empathetic and basically, not tell Leah what to do, but know what is her agenda, what are her motivations, what are the goals, and what are the questions I can do to kind of to get her where she wants to go. I mean, obviously you've got to do a lot more, but it is interesting you're mentioning empathy, because when I saw this question, I was like, oh, okay, well, and then I just started thinking, I'm doing a board certification and they're talking about leading with empathy. I'm like, really? And then I was talking to a CEO the other day, and he was saying, I think like the future is we need to be assessing for empathy. So people are talking about this, right? And when COVID first hit, one of the things that I observed the most is all of a sudden everybody wanted to know what their employees were thinking and their pain points. Like, employees were really becoming customers. And I was like going, yes, like we are getting it. We are right there with our employees. We're getting to know them. Maybe we can use this information to now build the employee experience that we all want, right? So that was, I don't think there's the same level as there was then, but I think we were heading in the right direction. Anyway, here are some tangible tips in terms of, I think, leading with empathy that I just really steal from my coaching days and practice. So the first one is kind of meet your team where they are. So teams are going through lots of change. They, have their lives on their mind, or they might be stuck. Before you try to guide them to goals or get into, day to day, make sure that you understand where they are. And so spend some time in the conversation understanding, how they're feeling, where they are, what else is happening. The second one is just make space for the one-on-one conversations. I mean, we've been saying this for so long, but honestly, if you don't have meaningful one-on-one conversations and listen for motivations and blockers and what's important to an employee, you're just not going to get the engagement and retention. And then the last one is just, share your own vulnerabilities. So, if you're talking to an employee about like work-life integration, you've struggled with that, so just share that, and that gives them permission to open up, and it gives you a way to relate to them.
I love that idea of sharing your own vulnerabilities. I think it's so important to be real, or else how is anyone gonna be real with you? And I'm gonna add one, but it's on the hiring side, about leading with heart, which is, I think sometimes we interview people and they're nervous or they're shy or they flop a question, and we judge them on it. But I think leading with heart also is thinking about, what experiences may have led that person to that reaction in that interview. Maybe someone experienced microaggressions in the past, or they've been treated differently for being female. And if you don't really think about those things when you're interviewing people, you may not be giving everyone a fair shot, right? Because anyone who's had a really privileged life is probably a lot better at interviewing. And so I think leading with heart also means being aware that we all don't come from the same backgrounds, and really considering that when we Okay, I'm going to go to an audience question. And I think this is a really, really good one. I'm afraid junior colleagues suffer from not having seniors around teaching them and just being able to listen to them. Is that a good reason to come into the office? This is something I think about all the time. So really, really curious to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, it is it is easier when you do those things in person. However, I've very effectively learned from other colleagues or trained under other colleagues via Zoom. So for example, if they're learning to be an advisor like I am, we have people sitting in on my calls, and then after we debrief, what did they learn? I even asked them what I could have done better. So that would be just one way that you could do it via Zoom that I think is really effective. Yeah, because we don't, but just because we don't have the office doesn't mean we don't have the opportunity to sometimes do, meet at a co-working space and work side by side on a project. So I think you've got to get creative. If you really want to learn from someone, you'll figure it out. And it definitely doesn't have to be in person. I mean, I learned so much on different Slack channels that I'm part of, for example.
I think one of the other things we need to train our junior employees to do, to go with what you're saying, is if you're in a Zoom meeting, it's not always easy to ask a question or get a word in. So that our more junior or less seasoned people are making notes of questions that come up for them during meetings, or even just, oh, I wonder how they solved that problem, like writing their thoughts down. And then in those one-on-ones that you talked about being so important to set up, giving them the opportunity to ask those questions. I think these are a couple ways we can address it, but yeah, I admit, and I see
100%. And you know what? I meet with so many people who say, I'm really interested in you sort of being a mentor or giving me advice, and then they really don't have a lot of questions, right? Yeah. So if they don't have that curiosity and they just say, I love your profile, yeah, I don't think you've done enough. I don't think you need to do a lot more work. It's like when people ask me, around a job, it's like, well, do your research, tell me what companies you're interested in, why, and what's your value prop, and then I'll help you.
Yeah. Okay, a fun one. And I'm going to encourage others to type their answers in the chat. What is the 2022 HR trend that you wish would disappear for 2023?
Yeah, I had to really think about this one. I think what I'm really hearing from employees because I do some interviews of employees in different early stage companies, is they are getting so overwhelmed with, almost spammed with all these different communication channels, whether it's the project management tool, the Slack, the email, and all the other channels. They don't know where to look and what the channel is. Are we making a decision on this channel? Are we ideating now? I don't know. And I really hear that a lot. So to me, again, going back to we need to define how we communicate in this company, and what do you use different channels for, and just be thoughtful about the tools that we use and how we use them. Yeah,
totally. I see some good answers coming in, and I hope quiet quitting goes away as well. That's been a nice buzzword. I see there's other agreements in there. Yeah. Awesome. Well, yes, thank you, everyone who's sharing in the chat, and continue to share. Okay, here's, I don't even want to call it a trend, although unfortunately I think it has been, but we talk a lot about diversity and equity and inclusion. We've been talking about it for a long time. Employees are demanding, as they should, action on this. I feel like we've had a lot of talk and less results, but I don't know why. For me, it feels like 2023 is a year where companies need to walk the walk rather than talking the talk. So, what advice would you give to the organizations that have a small or no budget for this, to make sure that they're doing what they need to do in this realm?
Yeah, maybe I make this too simplistic, but when I meet with companies, I don't if they don't buy into what I'm about to tell you, there's nothing I can do for them, right? So I fundamentally believe that if you want the best talent, you have to diversify the channels you look for that talent. And if you want the next best talent, which is what most people get, you take the easy route, which is what companies are mostly doing to get the next best talent. And if they don't fundamentally understand that they are getting the next best talent, not the best talent, then I'm probably going to have a hard time convincing them of anything. But, you know, I just think that the simplest thing we can do is just look at how we diversify our channels. And, you know, I've certainly diversified with using different hiring partners that have a great pool of diverse talent, whether that's on the board side, board list, and there's a whole bunch of others. I've used different platforms, again, that have diverse talent. And I've tapped into different communities like Women in Tech Sales, or the Black Tech Professionals Network, or Venture for Canada, or Van Hack. The list goes on. I would love to ask the chat, because they, you know, you're out there doing this work every day, is like, what has worked for you? Like, what is one diverse community platform recruiting partner that you would want to give a shout out to that's working for you?
Okay, we got a good group. You guys gave us a lot of good answers for the last one, so
Yeah.
I hope you do too. Okay, moving to a different topic. You know, the buzzword of skills has started popping up more and more. I think 2023, this is only going to increase. I don't think it's going to decrease. Do you see a lot of companies adding skills-based solutions to their tech stack this year? And I know all of you don't want yet another solution, but it seems like this is where we're trending.
Yeah, I think I'm seeing a little bit of an uptick. But absolutely, this has to be part of your tech stack, right? Like, fundamentally, employees value growth, and that's when they stop growing, they leave, right? But companies are all about growing, and what you know helps them grow is when people become skilled and are able to contribute more, and therefore they can grow more. Now, especially in the startup world, you know, where there's like an S curve for growing, is most people are high potential but underskilled in actually what they're doing. They're learning as they go, and therefore, you know, tools and technologies that can do this faster and ramp them up to productivity are kind of, I think, key to growth. So that's the way I sort of look at it.
I totally agree. I think it's insane that we know what we hired people to do, but we don't know what they actually can do. And in my experience, good employees can do almost anything. So, you know, if I have someone who's great and they work in, you know, department over here, but want to move here, like, yeah, I'm so happy to train them and let them add value in the way they want to add value. We don't always let people add value how they want, but it's not that difficult if you actually spend time to, you know, align what employees want with what the company needs, so you both benefit.
Yeah, and I think there's some good solutions out there, aren't there?
Yeah.
Plug. Yeah, I just see some answers coming through for some of the diversity stuff. I hope, Leah, I hope you'll share back some of the, I don't know, pearls of wisdom that might be in the chat.
Yeah, we will be. You see Alicia shaking her head. We're definitely going to share we're going to reshare the chat for anyone who wants to go back and watch it. And we'll also share some of what we talk about here. Sorry to make an unpopular question. The answers that we had from the 2022 trends we wish would go away. And I actually phrased it this way on my paper. I dislike the term, but I feel like I need to ask. Quiet quitting. It's just trending. You know, do you think it's continuing into 2023? You know, I'm asking what can companies do to combat this, but I think quiet quitting always existed. I think someone just
for sure. Yeah, we used to call it quitting on the job. I think it's just a different reason why we're having quiet quitting. I don't know. I saw a LinkedIn survey. It says it's up 10%. Okay. I don't know. I don't know what to make of it. Yeah, for sure. I mean, all I know is for my companies, for sure, retention is up, turnover is down, it's stabilizing. Is that a good thing? I mean, it's a good thing because it's very disruptive to a business when you have high turnover. But as things get better, will that, you know, change? I think a lot of people are sort of sitting there and waiting and seeing. and saying, well, I think I'll just stay here until, because the grass isn't greener anywhere. Anyway, but like in terms of what companies can do, I think there is a lot of things companies can do. Knowing why people are actually staying is really important. In my benchmarking report that you referenced, the top 3 retention factors that I found were connections, people having connections to other people in the organization, flexibility, and career growth and opportunities, which none of that is very surprising. But I think the thing is, you need to find out in your organization, what that means to people. What does flexibility look like? What do they actually value before you make any changes? So, things like focus groups and one-on-ones, or execs doing skip level meetings to try to find themes, document them, and then have a conversation, I think are really a good move in the right direction. I think pinpointing employees' key drivers, like I do this exercise with quite a few of the companies I work with where one of their quarterlies at sit downs are all about really reflecting on the top drivers of employees. So, and then that helps you personalize experience for them. But it also, if you take it and amalgamate it and start looking at the top drivers, then gives you, information about why people stay, right? And then you can build programs based on that. The third one is sort of upskilling your managers, because we know just the multiplier effect that managers have. So the structured one-on-one conversations. Like if a manager can't tell me how people are feeling in their department in terms of their well-being, or what people's main strengths and accomplishes are, or what their blockers are, or what their goals and plans are. I mean, that is the job of a manager. A manager needs to be spending most of their time really understanding how they can better utilize the assets that they have, which are people. And then last, in terms of quiet quitting, is, sharing the company roadmap and the progress and the plans, and that everybody understands where they fit into those plans.
I agree. Those are all great points. And also I see a comment in the chat that every one-on-one should be considered a stay interview. I totally agree. I mean, one-on-ones are there to check in with how someone's doing and how you can help them. And, I always say it, if you don't genuinely want to see other people succeed, don't be a people leader. Like, be a project leader, go lead other things, but don't lead people. The whole point of leading people is to help others succeed. And if you don't really want to do that, then don't be a manager. Alicia she's sitting next to me, but I'm gonna call her out.
I mean, it's stay in, because if you don't do the stay interviews, and a lot of the questions I mentioned are really stay interview kind of questions, then you do get the quiet quitting, because you're not having that conversation. You're actively avoiding the elephant in the room, right? Or you're avoiding treating people as holistic human beings who have capabilities and times that they want to maximize. And yeah.
Alicia once told me that she doesn't care about other people's success until we sat down and chatted about all the things she does to make other people successful. And then the next day she was like, you're right, I do care. I think sometimes you just don't even realize what that means, because we don't talk about leadership from that standpoint. It's not the way we frame it a lot of the time, which I find super confusing. It's my favorite part about leading people.
Me too.
Questions in the chat. Any great management training programs, courses, or workshops, tried and true, that you think are directly applicable?
I was going to give a shout out to just trying to remember, I was going to give a shout out to the leadership program that we use for our Mars later stage companies, but I'm having a complete blank. I just know Mick Berman is the one who runs it. So if you Google Mick Berman and leadership training, you'll probably get something. What I like about that model, and it's the same model that I would use, is it's more of a coaching model of leadership, where you just assume people, have some ideas of the answers, but you're really guiding them. Yeah, but I mean, in terms of management training, my big bias is towards coaches training. So if I was just gonna, if I was going to send managers and I had a small budget, I would probably send them on a really good coaches training. And there are some sort of beginner like I did CTI, that's one coaches training, and you get, in a weekend, you get like 3 days of coaching, coaches training. That's a good beginner thing. And the other thing is just how to have difficult conversations, because I find that's always hard for people, is being an assertive communicator. And I'm working with one company where we intended to spend one session, and we're probably going to spend 3 sessions really role playing out how to handle different scenarios. Yeah.
I think I agree. I really like coaching, and I see there's a couple of recommendations in the chat.
Good.
Creative leadership and improv, which is
Oh, improv.
Yeah.
Great one. It's such a great
Yeah.
one. Improv is a great one for, I think, learning to just be creative and building on people's ideas, right? Like the yes and. Love it.
It totally is. And in terms of coaching, I think like there's more formalized coaching, but even when you're coaching employees, what I've learned is you have to coach and lead people the way they want to be led. I had someone in my last job that just loved to be micromanaged, and it's completely not my style. I like things short and to the point. I like concise, and he was long-winded and wanted so much of my attention, and it annoyed me until I realized that this was someone who soaked in everything like a sponge. And I switched my style to micromanagement, and I was like, send me every big email before you send it out, and I'll give you, the edits, because he was having trouble with the way he was crafting emails, and, come to me before we have these conversations. And when I did this person's feedback at the end of the following year, and it was a bigger company, we did 360 feedback. Like everything I was coaching him on, without me specifically asking about it, were things people told me they noticed improved. And I was like, okay, so micromanagement, not always bad. And so I think coaching is all about, how does this person need to be coached? Is it meeting with me, once a week, once a month? Is it real time? And I think this is the way you can really, really help people improve, is how is it that they're going to learn? Because we're all,
as long as they're learning quickly. Like, as long as it's just the same with my kids. I always tell them, I don't care about your report card. I just want to see progression. Yeah.
Right. Okay, so I'm glad I didn't tell you guys my favorite trend. I hope it's here. It's a 2022 trend. I think it's been going on way longer, because I realize I have a question about it. So, I'm sure we all remember, the days where we boasted about having these big teams. I remember when I was at CoinSquare, we hit 100 employees. We got cupcakes with numbers on them and cracked champagne. But I do think that these days are over. And now, the brag or the goal is, lean organizations that are efficient, that have good retention and good cultures. See companies being able to operate in this lean model without overloading their workforces, but also retaining employees at the same time.
Yeah, well, you kind of hit on a big trigger for me, so I'll try not to rant too much, but I was never about the big head count. I always thought that's, it's not sustainable and it's the wrong measurement. So, I mean, fundamentally, when I hire someone, if I can't tell you what their milestones going to be in the next 6 months, what do I expect the outcomes to be? What do I expect what competencies do I expect them to gain and be able to then, apply? Then I shouldn't be hiring that person. I mean, it has always been about contribution and outcomes. And I think it should kind of continue to be. Every person you hire, you have to look through that lens. It can't just be because the CEO wants to hire, but that's the case that every manager needs to make. Yeah, I mean, when I look at some of the measurements I really look at is ultimately, just like a customer, you're trying to extend the value of your employees' life with you, right? You're trying to encourage them to stay with you and take all that know-how and convert it into contribution and outcomes and innovation and all those things. So to me, revenue per employee or EBITDA per employee and tenure, which sounds like such an old concept, like tenure, but if you can only retain them for 6 months, you've just lost money. Like, it doesn't make sense. So it's, to me, revenue per employee and tenure together, if you multiply that, will give you what the lifetime value of an employee is. And you're always just, to me, trying to shoot for that and trying to have a profitable business as well as a great culture. And you have to, if there's trade-offs, and you have to keep thinking about both of those. It's not like one or the other, just, it has to be both. Did I answer your question? I told you, you triggered me. That's a big trigger for me. I have to go to therapy now. Ha, work therapy.
I understand why it's a trigger. I mean, there's so many things I'm thinking of, and you're right. Like, let's first make sure we really need to hire this person. Like, for those of you who are in recruiting, how often have you been hiring a role where someone's like, I need a marketing manager, and they give you the job description, and you're like, they just Googled marketing manager and like picked the, what they liked from the top 6 job descriptions. And, you're one, like, do you really need a marketing manager? Like, if you did, shouldn't you be able to tell me what it is you need to hire? And then you start, bringing in candidates, and it takes forever. And like, there's just so much time and money being wasted. And then what happens? You hire the wrong person, and it's expensive to have employee turnover. The average employee mid-level making 100K, it costs $150,000 above and beyond their base salary to replace them. So
yeah. Or you hire the right person and they're actually like a 5X employee, and you don't know what you actually want them to achieve. You're just like, oh, I thought you would sort of tell me that. I thought you'd tell me your first 100 days. Well, as a company, there was a reason you hired them, and you should be able to at least share that with them. Otherwise, you're probably like, if you don't know where A and B is, then you're not going to get B probably.
That's such a fair point. Like, how many times have you guys in job interviews had to do a 90-day plan to show what you're going to do on the job? But you're right, the company should give you the 90-day plan while you're learning the company.
Yeah.
And just some other interesting stats. If you invest in the development of employees, they're likely to stay 2 times as long. And I mean, I think this is the number, but don't quote me on this one. I think every dollar you invest in development results in like $30 for the company. So I think, lots of positive things we can do to keep people. And
I want to see that stat. That's interesting, Leah.
I think I have it up on my computer somewhere, because
okay, you better find it.
Why it's fresh in my head. I will send it to you. To my question, which is, one of the, trends I see with everyone that we're talking to at Tiller is trying to move from, training as a perk to training as a strategy. And, I talked at Disrupt HR last week, for those of you who were there, about why your investment in learning and development doesn't actually result in development. So, what do you think companies need to do in 2023 to make sure that they're actually growing, developing, upskilling, and investing in the growth of their teams?
Yeah, I mean, the way I've always thought of this my whole career really is that as an individual, as a team, as an organization, every day you want to be improving 1%. So you want to build that culture of asking yourself, how can I be better? How can I be more efficient? That everybody is asking that at all of those layers. It's really such a simple thing, but it doesn't happen. Usually what happens is, oh my God, we've got to cut costs. Okay, now how can we be more efficient? Okay, everybody, every team go and ask themselves and come up with 5 ideas. Well, this is what we should be doing all the time. Like, learning is, like you said, a strategy. Learning is innovation. We have to be learning all the time and getting better. And I think startups have to do it even faster, or they're going to be out of business. So I really like the 70-20-10 model, because it helps companies say, okay, how does learning happen, and how can learning happen every day? And when I work with companies, it's helping them build a 70-20-10 model. So 70% of what we learn is we learn from experience. So what does that look like in your company? Use the 70-20-10-20 to kind of talk, describe, okay, is that projects? Is that job shadowing? Is that, being side by side? What does that look like to learn from experience? Let's put all the ways we can do that. And then 20% is social learning. It's the mentoring, it's the buddy program, it's the online peer-to-peer communities, it's the giving and receiving of feedback. You may have coaches in your organization. So what does that look like? And then last, the small part really is the formal learning, right? And that's where budgets are helpful. But it's such a small part of how we learn. So to me, we've got to build out those other opportunities to learn and have our own model that managers can kind of go, okay, yeah, these are different options, or employees can look at and say, oh, okay, well, like, where do I want to choose my adventure? Like, what can I do to grow? And it's more of the how, right? The how.
Yeah, I think we often focus a lot on the learning and forget to tie it into the development piece.
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, I am at my last question. So if you guys have questions, type them in the chat and I will get to them after this one. Another topic that's, coming up, I think it's maybe down a bit, but it's obviously very important, is social responsibility. So what do you think employees and customers expect to see from their companies on this front?
Well, I think there was someone came up with a saying years ago, it was maybe 1950s or 60s, is like, the personal is political. And I think these days the personal is very political. You cannot be, as a company, you cannot be tone deaf to what's happening in the world, locally or globally. You have to understand that. You have to understand how it affects your customers and employees, and be able to have, thoughtful conversations about it at the executive level, and where you stand and how you're going to support employees. So you see ESG becoming part of board competencies. You see those metrics being integrated into companies, in addition to the financial and operational. And I think, when when things come up, an executive has to have, this is what we do. Okay, we're going to acknowledge the issues, and this is how we're going to acknowledge. We're going to create a space for conversations. We're going to give employees permission for self-care. We're going to point them to the right resources. Have a bit of this is what we do as things come up, and have someone you make sure that people, the executive or someone in the executive is really scanning what's happening in the world, and what might our employees and customers really care about, and where we need to have a conversation proactively.
Sounds like there's a lot of complicated things we need to focus on, but I truly believe 2023 is going to be such a good year. I really think that we're getting to the right place with so many of the things we've been talking about, and I think we're going to see, great things happen for the way we work, the way companies are run, and how happy we can all be at work. So last chance for any questions. If not, we're going to give you the best gift that anyone can have, which is 15 minutes back in your day. I know that's one of my favorite things to get. And it looks like no more questions are coming in. So thank you so much, Daneal. This was such an interesting chat. I hope you guys all enjoyed it. We will send it out along with a summary and all the tips that you got. And we hope everyone enjoys their day.
Thank you for the opportunity, Leah, and thanks, everyone.